Okay, here we go. So welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us on your lunch break. We're delighted to see that so many of you are apparently interested in learning Arabic. I'll just do a quick introduction, just a couple of housekeeping notes here. If you could just keep your microphones on mute throughout the session. Jacob is going to be sharing a presentation for about 40 minutes. During that time, you are welcome to ask your questions in the chat box. There's a little chat box at the bottom of your screen. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions that you may have along the way. And we will take questions at the end of the session, about 20 minutes or so. And hopefully by the end of this, you will be very eager to start learning Arabic. So welcome. We're delighted to have Jacob Halpin here today with us. Jacob is the author of the newly published 13 Ways to Make a Plural, which is designed to help new students make a success of learning Arabic. Jacob currently works at the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office as a British diplomat. And he learned Arabic, I believe, while studying at SOAS and also during his time working abroad in Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq, among many different places. Is that right, Jacob?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So just have a few more people to admit. And I guess the floor is all yours. Just one more quick technical thing. If you, Jacob is going to be showing a presentation. So if you put your screens on speaker view, at the top right of your screen, there's a little button that you can switch the view. I would definitely recommend putting it on speaker view because then you will be able to see what is on the presentation. That's it for me for now. The floor is all yours, Jacob.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to speak today. And nice to see so many people on the call. I'm going to use a presentation, so I'm going to share that now with you all. So hopefully you can see that clearly.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to start by addressing this question of why you need to prepare to learn Arabic, which you can see the front cover of my book there. That's really what the book is. Why can't you just dive in and get on with learning Arabic? And to explain why I think it's useful to do a bit of preparation before you start, I'm going to go back briefly to my own experience of learning Arabic. And as you mentioned there, I studied at SOAS in London for 6 months. I spent a year in Jordan learning, and then some classes later on in Lebanon. And I met a lot of other people learning Arabic during that time, and they were studying for all kinds of different reasons, different motivations. And I noticed that I was quite fortunate in a way because I had a very clear goal that I was aiming for. I knew what kind of Arabic I needed to learn. I knew what level I needed to get to. And I had a program that was well established to follow. But quite a lot of people were learning without such a clear idea of where they wanted to get to and how they were going to get there with their Arabic. And I felt that it was quite common for people to get to a sort of intermediate level where they had learnt a fair amount of standard Arabic and a bit of colloquial Arabic, and I'm going to come back and explain what those are in a moment. But they perhaps hadn't got to where they thought they would have got to with their Arabic studies after maybe 6 months, 12 months, perhaps longer. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they hadn't had a clear plan, a clear idea of what they were aiming for when they began. So that's really the idea of my book and the points I'm going to be talking about today. It's trying to make the whole business of learning Arabic more transparent for people when they're starting off so they can have a better idea of what they're aiming for and how they can get there. So it's ultimately a more successful experience. So the areas I'm going to talk about over the next half hour or so are, first of all, a bit about the Arabic language itself. I'll talk about this difference between standard Arabic and colloquial Arabic, which is really important when you're starting out. I'll cover this idea of how you work out your own personal roadmap for learning Arabic. I'll cover some practical advice, hints and tips on how you can learn more effectively. And then I'll talk a bit about studying abroad if you're able to do that and how to really make the most of it. And there'll be some time at the end then for question and answer. If you have burning questions as we're going through, feel free to put them in the chat. And if I can spot them as we go, I'll try to answer. But there'll be some time at the end as well for questions. So a bit on the Arabic language, first of all. The slight reality check, if you like, is that it is a hard language. There's no point dressing it up otherwise. In a technical sense, it is known as a hard language, along with others. It's in fact not the hardest. Languages like Japanese, Korean, Mandarin are on the top tier. So it could be worse. Arabic is the next level down, but it is challenging. And for me, there are 5 things that really stand out that make it difficult. First of all, the script. A lot of the letters look very similar, in fact, are very similar. Often it's only the position of a dot that allows you to distinguish between them. It's a cursive script, so the letters are all joined up. And that means it takes a lot of practice to recognize the letters and therefore to be able to read proficiently. The sounds then, about 1/3 of the sounds don't exist in English, so it takes quite a lot of practice to be able to pronounce them well and to understand reliably. The grammar, and this is particularly the case with standard Arabic, is big and quite complicated. Then there are multiple forms of Arabic, which I'm going to come on to in a bit more detail. That, for me, is probably the biggest reason that genuinely getting on top of Arabic is tough, because you're almost learning more than one language. And then finally, and again, this is more with standard Arabic, but the vocabulary is very large. The more positive message to go alongside that is that, yes, it is hard, but it's not impossible, and you can learn Arabic. I do think that anyone can learn it. I don't really myself buy the idea that some people are just naturally gifted with languages and some people aren't. I think that when I think about people I know that have got very good at Arabic, two main things stand out. They've all studied hard, they put a lot of work into it, and I think they've probably all spent significant amounts of time within a genuine immersion with extended exposure to using the language. And those things are available to anyone if you're motivated and up for doing it. And it can be slow going, and I think for anyone at times it will be slow going, but I also think that having a plan before you begin can make the whole process a lot more manageable. And the difficulty does depend on the kind of Arabic you learn, which is quite an important thing to be aware of when you're setting out. So the question of modern standard Arabic and colloquial Arabic. This is really important, and I would urge anyone who's setting out to get your heads around this before you start learning. You will also probably have heard of classical Arabic, which is the Arabic that the Quran is written in and other religious texts. But in terms of working languages used day to day, you've got 2 choices really, modern standard and colloquial. So I'm going to run through basically what the difference is between the 2. So modern standard Arabic, also known as just standard Arabic or MSA, or in Arabic, Fusha. This is, if you like, it's a proper Arabic, which is a bit unfair on colloquial Arabic, but that's how many people will see it. It's sort of the real full thing. It derives from classical Arabic. It is consistent across the Arab world, which is a major plus when you're looking at it from the point of view of a learner. There is an extensive vocabulary. There's a lot of grammar in standard Arabic. It is basically the written language of Arabic. Anything of any substance will be written in standard Arabic. And it's the language that's used for all kinds of news, broadcast, written news, newspapers, more formal interactions, speeches, and typically more complex topics. So if you were discussing the law or economics, for example, you'd probably be using more standard Arabic, certainly the vocabulary of standard Arabic. For daily use, however, it's feels to the native speaker very cumbersome. It feels long-winded, and it just feels inappropriately formal. So if you go into a shop in an Arab country and use formal Arabic, you will probably be understood, but it will just sound a little bit odd to the person you're speaking to, and they may chuckle a little bit. They might be a bit impressed that you can speak standard Arabic, but they'll probably reply in colloquial because it just feels much more natural. And then the question of how long does it take to learn? To get to a level that I would describe as strong fluency, so this is where you could, for example, have a business meeting in Arabic and you wouldn't understand everything. There would be points you struggle on and a few things you might struggle to communicate clearly, but you can do it with a good level of competence, a good level of confidence. That you would probably need about 18 months full-time study to get to that level. And by full-time, I mean 3 or 4 hours of classes a day and maybe 3 hours of self-study. So genuinely a full-time program. And you can break down that 18 months if you're studying part-time or doing an evening class. Clearly it will stretch out over a much longer time period, but that you can get a rough idea then of what the timelines involved. Moving to colloquial Arabic, also known as dialect or Ammiya in Arabic. It derives from standard Arabic. Colloquial Arabic varies quite a lot between regions, which is an important point. The grammar is simpler, the vocabulary is smaller, the verb conjugations are easier than standard Arabic. None of this is particularly easy. It's still a challenging language, but relatively speaking, it is easier. Colloquial is the Arabic that is used for all kinds of daily interactions. So with family, with friends, with colleagues, all of that would be in colloquial. It is primarily a spoken language. It is a spoken language. And so while you can write down things in colloquial Arabic, it's not used really. You might write a text message or a tweet or a note, but it's unusual to write anything very substantial in colloquial, which means that if you study colloquial Arabic, your ability to read things, to read a newspaper, for example, will be pretty limited. And you'll struggle to understand more complex topics. For example, if you watch the news, you'll get bits, but you won't understand that much if you've only learned colloquial. And the time it takes to learn, it's more difficult to estimate with colloquial Arabic because with it being the language of daily life, if you live abroad and you're studying abroad, if you have a lot of opportunity to practice, you'll progress much more quickly. But roughly speaking, to give an indication, you might get to an equivalent level of strong fluency after about 9 months of full-time study, if you perhaps included in that in a period when you're genuinely immersed in the language. So that's a rough estimate, but the takeaway point perhaps there is that it's perhaps as little as half the time to get to an equivalent level as with standard Arabic. So a little bit more on the different forms of colloquial Arabic. This map is, so I'm just rearranging my screen slightly so I can see it, is a very simplified version. There's actually lots of different dialects, but this is useful because it gives us the main 5 families, if you like, of dialects. So you've got a number of North African dialects labeled Maghrebi here, Egyptian dialect, Levantine, so that's including Syria, Palestinian, Jordanian, and Lebanese, then Iraqi and Gulf. Levantine Arabic is probably the one that is most commonly learnt by students. It's quite well understood elsewhere in the region, which is useful from a student's point of view, and is a bit closer to standard Arabic than some of the other dialects. Egyptian Arabic is also quite well understood across the region, mainly thanks to the films and TV that are produced in Egypt and then watched elsewhere in the region, so people become used to the dialect. North African Arabic, or the various dialects from that region, many of them are moving quite a long way away from standard Arabic and are very different to other dialects. So your ability to use those dialects more widely can be more limited. That's worth having in mind as you're thinking about your Arabic options. So moving to this idea then of working out your own personal roadmap for Arabic, I think when you're doing this, you can really ask yourself three main questions. First of all, why do you want to learn Arabic? For example, are you going to use it as a professional skill? Is it for your next holiday, whenever it is we're allowed to go on holiday again, to smooth your path? Is it because your partner's family, for example, speak Arabic? Maybe it's just a personal interest in the language. But your answer to that question will have a major effect on the kind of Arabic you want to learn, and also the level you'll need to get to. That will all then have a bearing on how much time, if you're being realistic about it, you'll need to be able to put aside to studying daily and weekly, and also how long you'll need to be doing that study for. And of course, your aims ultimately have to match up to what you can, to the time and resources you can put in to learning. And I think if you give those questions a bit of thought before getting going with Arabic, you have a much better chance of having a satisfying experience, whether you're going for an advanced level or whether you're just hoping to get some basic Arabic together. You know, any goal is great, but I think matching your plan and your resources to what you want is really important. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk a bit about the more practical side, some advice on how you can make the process of learning more effective. So we've established, I think, that you can't, unfortunately, learn Arabic in 30 days. So when you see those books and online courses promising you that, don't fall for it. You might learn a set of basic vocab in 30 days, which is pretty good, but there isn't, sadly, any magic bullet that's going to make it easy. But you can certainly make the process a bit smoother. And I think that is important partly for maintaining motivation, because I think everyone I know who studied Arabic has had periods that have been frustrating when it feels like things just aren't moving forwards. For me, the first couple of months I found really tough. You're just being hit with so much new grammar, new words, new script, and it really sort of made my brain melt every day during classes. But that does pass, you do get to grips with it and it starts to make more sense. I found there was a period at the intermediate level as well, when it's really about practicing, expanding your vocabulary, and you don't have that sense of progression as much. And that, I think, can drag as well. But I think for motivation, being ready that there's going to be times that feel a bit tough or a bit slow, and just accepting that you're willing to push on through that is important. It does get slightly easier as it goes on, which is nice to know, I think. Next point, studying outside class. It feels like I'm stating the obvious. It does matter that you're studying outside class. If you're doing full-time Arabic, then that's taken care of. If you're doing, say, an evening class every week, then doing even just a little bit of study outside of class, I think, is very different to not doing any at all, even if it's just your homework. And if you can do a bit more, again, that will all build up. It will make a big difference to how fast you can progress. And adding your study into your routine, for example, vocabulary revision, which is probably the biggest, most time-consuming part of it. You can find ways to revise vocab cards or use an app that helps you recycle words. When you're in the old days traveling to work or free time in the evening, whenever it is that works for you, find ways to work it into your routine, and that can make a big difference. And then there are lots of practical methods out there that you can try to find out what works for you, what you enjoy, what makes it fun. I'm going to give a few examples now of those, but I'd recommend experimenting with different things and finding which of those methods works for you. So speaking then, sorry, excuse me 1 second. Okay, speaking. I think that studying at a desk with your textbooks can sometimes feel more comfortable than going out and talking to people and practicing your speaking. You know, there's no risk of looking silly because you've used the wrong word when you're sat with your textbooks. But clearly you can't become fluent from a book. The only way to do that is through lots and lots of speaking practice. Fluency is basically being able to recall, to retrieve all the words from your memory fast enough that you don't have to stop to think about it. And to do that, you have to find ways to practice talking. even if it's uncomfortable. A few very common ways of doing this. One is language groups, so a group of students and ideally some native speakers as well get together, and it's quite a social way of having conversation practice. Also popular is to use language exchanges, which I'd highly recommend, where you get together with someone with an Arabic speaker who wants to practice their English, and you split the time, spend a while speaking each language. Doesn't cost anything. You can get someone who can give you feedback and corrections. And then what I call conversation tutors, I think is really valuable as well. This is where you will essentially pay someone to listen to you speaking Arabic, but a native speaker who can give you some feedback. It's much cheaper than a teacher. It doesn't need to be someone trained in teaching. Various online, on various sites that facilitate this, Natakalam, Italki, Medina Arabic, are all ones that I've used or know of. I think Natakalam is a great idea. It originally started linking up Syrian refugees with people who were studying Arabic via the web to give one group employment, to give the other group a way to practice with native speakers. So I think that's a very nice concept, but there's many options out there. And a final point on speaking is, do remember that you need to be talking with someone or with people who speak the kind of Arabic that you're wanting to learn. So obviously if it's a dialect, it needs to be someone from the right country. And if you're wanting to practice standard Arabic, then educated Arabs will speak standard Arabic, but people speak it to quite varying levels. Some people are more comfortable speaking it than others. So you may have to just check and explain what kind of Arabic you're wanting to practice to make sure that's going to work in the exchange. A bit on the listening then, and I think it's important not to neglect listening. I think it can feel less like you're studying. If you're sitting listening to a TV program or listening to the radio, it doesn't have that sense that you're doing your homework, but it's an absolutely essential skill, clearly, and does need to be part of your study routine. There are ways you can vary your practice, which I think is quite healthy. For example, listening to individual sentences, let's say in a news report, and listening to a single sentence over and over to push yourself to understand as much as you can before you move on. You can do that with slightly longer sections, like a 3-minute news broadcast, and really try and extract as much understanding as you can before you move on. Another technique is to listen to a piece and without worrying about your understanding, particularly if you're more of a beginner, just try to hear every single syllable that's being spoken, to force your brain, your ear, to tune in to the words as they're being spoken. It's also really important that you can find good listening resources to practice with. And of course, they will need to match the kind of Arabic that you want to learn. So some suggestions for standard Arabic, first of all. Al Jazeera is a fantastic resource. There's lots and lots of material, mainly politics and media, but quite a range of topics on the Al Jazeera website. It is quite hard. The pre-recorded pieces in particular, if you're looking at a studio discussion where people are speaking off the cuff, it becomes slightly easier. But the Arabic in general is quite complex on Al Jazeera. Similarly with Al Arabiya, another Arab network, lots of good material on their website. And then BBC Arabic is quite good, not just because there's lots of material, but it tends to be a slightly simpler level of Arabic, both in their written news pieces and also in the televised material. So that's useful. And then really getting into the niches of the kind of Arabic you want to practice, thinking about standard Arabic with a bit of a regional accent. So for example, if you watch an Iraqi political discussion show on TV, they're probably going to be speaking in standard Arabic, but there might be a little bit of Iraqi accent in the way the words are pronounced. There might be a little bit of colloquial language being used for some of the very common terms. And if you know, let's say you're going to be in Iraq or Lebanon, you need to understand that kind of language. Listening to a bit of discussion that has a hint of the local dialect in there, or local pronunciation, can be very helpful, so you don't find that you're thrown when you hear this slightly imperfect version of standard Arabic being used, as is very commonly the case. And then colloquial Arabic, the resources are going to be a bit different. but there's lots of good stuff out there. Podcasts, I think, are excellent. They tend to be very clear. Soap operas are good. The disadvantage I find with soap operas is often they're made to be very dramatic. So there are all these pauses for suspense, which are really annoying when you want to hear as much Arabic as possible, but you get the thread of the storyline, so they can be quite a fun way to do it. And I think topical discussion shows, so by that I'm meaning a TV show where you might have celebrities discussing issues or the presenters in a very informal context, and that will probably be in very colloquial Arabic. So find the right resources you need to practice your listening. And then looking at reading, I think that, I mean, a lot of this can be a bit painful at first, but I think reading in particular, at the beginning, it just doesn't, it feels like you've regressed to when you were 3 years old learning English and the letters just didn't mean anything. And it feels exactly the same with Arabic. It looks like squiggles and dots to begin with, but that does change, and it just needs lots and lots of practice of seeing and recognizing the letters, and gradually they will start to take shape and you will get to the point where you can recognize them instantly. There are ways you can vary your reading practice to keep it fresh. In the earlier stages, one method is to take a short piece of text and read it out loud as fast as you can. Don't worry about understanding anything, just read it out loud, and that forces you to recognize every single letter as you're going through. See how long it takes you to get through a piece of the same length, and you can measure your progress. And then as you become a bit more advanced, take a slightly longer text and give yourself a very short time to read it, a minute or two, and see how much information, how much understanding you can extract in that time. It's good because we tend to read things quite slowly and want to understand every sentence as we go. But if you do the opposite and push yourself to skim read, that helps, I think, the brain to read effectively. Another method I think is quite useful is deconstructing sentences. So what I mean by that is, written Arabic the sentences tend to be very long sometimes, and the sentence structures are often very complicated. And so you'll find there are pronouns referring to nouns that were perhaps 2 or 3 lines earlier in the text, and it's not always clear which verb is linked to which subject. And so it can be very useful from time to time to take a complex sentence and perhaps write it all out and say, can I work out, do I understand the relationship between all these bits in the sentence, and really push yourself to do that. And just doing that occasionally can really make sure you are genuinely understanding what you're reading, rather than do the tempting thing, which is to slightly gloss over it and settle for more or less understanding it, which isn't really what you want in the long run. And finally here, I think making yourself reread pieces before you grab the dictionary, which is the first thing we all want to do when we don't understand a word, partly because you're never going to understand everything in Arabic, and so it's good to become comfortable not having full understanding, but also reading a sentence twice, maybe 3 times, often you realize you can understand more than you realized. You recognize some root letters, or there's a construction that you can work out from something you already know. So it's a good discipline to push yourself to understand as much as possible before you reach for the dictionary. Okay, so I'm going to move on then to talk a little bit about studying abroad and how you can make the most of that. You don't have to travel abroad to learn Arabic, and there's a few points here I'll highlight that I think you can use even if you're studying at home. If you can, clearly it's a huge benefit in practicing and feeling how the language works, how it fits with the culture. The most popular places for students to go and learn Arabic, you'll see Syria and Yemen are in brackets there. Before the 2 wars in those countries, they were both popular places. I think Damascus was probably the most popular place of all. Sadly, obviously, people aren't studying Arabic there at the moment. I think Jordan, Amman is probably the most common destination for Arabic students. Lebanon, Beirut is popular, although I think Beirut is, in my view, it's not actually the ideal place to learn Arabic. The Lebanese are very multilingual, and Beirut has a very lively social scene, which is great, but means the Arabic immersion experience doesn't tend to happen as much. There are also some Arabic schools in the West Bank, which have a good reputation in that region. Egypt is a very popular place. There's a lot of well-established schools in Cairo. Elsewhere in North Africa, Tunisia and Morocco are the main destinations for students. And then looking across to the Gulf, Oman has a number of good Arabic schools. Other Gulf countries are not such popular destinations for learning Arabic. And one of the big difficulties with going there is that there tends to be very large numbers of migrant workers, typically doing a lot of the service jobs, the people you interact with on a daily basis. And so you'll often be interacting with people who either aren't native speakers, or perhaps don't speak much Arabic at all, which starts to defeat the point of going overseas to learn Arabic. And one other point to keep in mind is that even if you're going abroad to a language centre to study standard Arabic, you will still pick up a bit of a local dialect, because you will need at least a few words just to buy things in shops and explain to a taxi driver where you want to go. So that will start to shape your longer term grasp of a dialect, even if it's not your main priority. So that's still something that's worth considering when you're thinking about where you might go to study. Living arrangements then. I think there's a sense that going to study Arabic abroad, you just automatically will soak up the language and without too much effort just emerge from the other end of the process fluent. It's not quite as straightforward as that. And I think if you're really going to make the most of being abroad, you've actually got to work quite hard to shape a lifestyle and a routine that has a lot of Arabic in it. Because outside of your classes, assuming you're at a language school of some kind, you won't necessarily spend your time talking to people. It really depends on how you shape your life. So some points on that idea. First of all, where you live in the city. Ideally, you'll live in an area that has a local community feel. So an area where there are lots of smaller shops, people will shop locally, as opposed to jumping in the car and going to a mall. And if you're part of that more local community environment, if I can describe it in that way, you'll just have lots of opportunities to have those small interactions with people that allow you to start using the language and start to hear it more around you. And you will ideally live in a part of town that doesn't have too many foreigners, and so people aren't very accustomed to using English, don't speak much English, which makes it a bit less comfortable, it's more challenging for you, but it means you will be forced to use all the Arabic you can. And typically, Arabic students tend to congregate in the parts of town that have become used to having foreigners there. So if there's a way you can avoid that for your Arabic, that can be really beneficial. It's also worth thinking about studying outside of the capital city, because capital cities, people tend to speak more English. If you study elsewhere, the chances are you'll have a more genuine immersion experience. Thinking then about who to live with, and I think here you've basically got three options. You'll either live with other foreigners, other Arabic students, and this is what I think the majority of people do. Other students, or perhaps other foreigners who are abroad for other reasons. And there's lots of positives here. It allows you to make friends, have a social life. It's a support network for all the challenges of living abroad and managing a different language. And people to share all the great things about being abroad with. The downside from a language point of view is that you will almost certainly be speaking in English, because that's the international language. And so the chances are most of your social time is not going to be in Arabic. Another option would be to live with local people, which, if you can do it, it would be fantastic, because you would then be surrounded, presumably every evening at weekends, with people speaking Arabic. It's actually quite hard to do this, because if you're still a relative beginner, which you presumably are, how do you get to know people? How do you build those friendships? Read the adverts, persuade people they want to live with you if you're not really able to talk to them. There are some quite significant practical barriers there, but if you can find an opportunity to do this, then it will be more challenging because you'll constantly be in that uncomfortable position of not being able to explain as well as you want to, not understanding everything. But it will be really, really good for your Arabic over time. And then the third option is a homestay. So this is, excuse me, this is living with a family, but on the understanding that you're doing it partly because you want to use it to improve your Arabic and to have exposure to the language. This is easier to arrange, partly because some Arabic schools will be able to do it for you, particularly if you push them a bit. Even if they don't formally offer that, they may well be able to link up with an appropriate family. It's not always straightforward because if the local culture is conservative, as it often is, particularly for male students living with Muslim families where the women are veiled, that doesn't really work. So it's not always straightforward, but there are ways this can be done, and it can be a very good way to expose yourself to more Arabic. And then looking at your daily life and how you can incorporate as much Arabic as possible into it. The basic question is, how much Arabic are you speaking? How much Arabic are you hearing throughout your day? And I think it takes quite a bit of experimenting and trying different things to create a routine while you're living abroad that has a lot of Arabic in it. And there are a number of fairly obvious things you can try to make that happen. So language exchanges, which I'd strongly recommend because it's a great way, apart from other things, to make local friends. And just listening to the TV and the radio, can you listen to a radio program as you walk to your language school, or listen to a news show twice a week in the evening? Or schedule in some reading so that your time outside of classes also involves Arabic. And then interest groups, whatever it is that you like doing, whether it's a sports club or dance, cooking. There's volunteer work that doesn't require too much Arabic, so you can try that. And I think you'll do some of these things and they'll turn out not to be very helpful at all because you're just not getting much exposure, but it's hopefully been an interesting experience anyway. But you'll do other things that will actually be really good, and you'll find yourself surrounded by people who are speaking a lot of Arabic. So there's a lot of testing and trying things out here. And I think it all requires you to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. That thing of not being in command of a language very well, it is uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more you will start to progress and build your confidence. And I think this principle about trying to build an Arabic routine, you can take it and use it studying at home in the UK or wherever people are calling in from today. Clearly, if you're in an Arabic speaking country, you can have more Arabic in your day. But even if you're at home, are there ways you can do more reading? Can you listen to a TV show? Can you listen to a podcast when you go for a walk every day? All these little things add up and can just mean you're getting more exposure and more practice. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. There's a lot more on all of the topics I've covered in my book, and there's also some other areas. I talk about how to manage Arabic grammar and prioritize the stuff that you really need to get right and the stuff you can perhaps leave till later. What it takes to get to an advanced level of Arabic, and also what you'll need in different professions if you're looking to use Arabic professionally. So I'm very happy to answer some questions if people have them. And I see there's a few, I think, in the chat already.
Am I unmuted? Yes.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay. Thank you very much, Jacob. That was really interesting. It's always fun to hear someone else's perspective on learning Arabic. I mean, I as a half Arabic of half Arabic heritage, I always thought that it was. I mean, I speak 4 languages, but Arabic is definitely the most challenging one, but it's also the most fun, because when I was in school, I had a few Arabic speaking friends. I was educated in France, and it was a great way to gossip and say, have our little private chats with friends and have no one else understand. And that was like the most precious thing we ever had in school. Anyway, so Yes, we do have a few questions. And just a little clarification from Saeed, who said the link, the Al Jazeera news link in the presentation, there's a small typo. It's actually, it's aljazeera.net without the hyphen, in case.
Thank you. Great.
Someone made a note of that. First question is from Becky, our Becky. She is asking, she's saying, thanks for the great presentation. I was wondering how regularly you speak Arabic at the moment now that you're based in the UK, and whether you find that your skill level dips if you aren't using it. And if this is the case, how do you like to refresh it?
Yes, and I've been back in the UK for 2 years now, and I think it's the case with any language really, although I think with Arabic, because it takes a lot of effort to move your language forward, it leaves you quite quickly as well, which is a frustrating thing. Mm. But I am a little rusty at the moment, I will certainly confess that. I mean, I try to do bits here and there. At the moment, I'll often go for a walk at lunchtime while we're on lockdown, and I'm listening to an Arabic podcast. So I'm getting in a bit of listening. I haven't spoken much Arabic for quite a long time. And I think it's the challenge, whether we're learning or trying to maintain Arabic. It's a lot of it's about time and trying to find ways we can slot it into our lives. I think when you've used Arabic for an extended period, let's say you've lived abroad for maybe a few years, it does become a bit fixed, and I think you can retrieve it with a period of using it relatively intensively. So I think you can build it back up.
Yeah, like most languages, it's really about, practicing and as much as you can, and having conversations with people, or even I find that watching films in Arabic with subtitles helps a lot. By the end of that hour and a half or 2 hours of having just listened to Arabic, I feel like my vocabulary comes back really quickly.
Yeah, I think there's something about just keeping the Arabic bit of your brain, even if it's just moving slightly, because you're doing a little bit of practice on a regular basis. I think that's very different to doing nothing at all.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're improving, it stops you from losing it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Daphne says, thank you for this, very useful. You mentioned conversation classes with Syrian refugees. Could I have some more information on this, please? Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, that was an organization called Natakallam. I'll type it again in the chat. That's how they spell it. They have a website, I'm sure, and you will register your interest and you want to learn Arabic, and they then pay you up online with someone who is available to be your partner, and that's a service you pay for. But the language partners, as opposed to language teachers, the partners through any exchange are a lot cheaper than paying for an actual teacher.
Yeah, and this is exclusively online, this platform, I believe, right?
Yes, yeah. It's online.
I hope that answers your question, Daphne. The link is in the chat if you want to check out their website. Jacob or Amani or anyone else who's already at a speaking level, are there any places in London where you might recommend going to practice speaking Arabic? Well, of course.
I suppose the Edgware Road is the obvious place. If you're, although I think that there's a difference between having a very short exchange in a shop and having a more substantial conversation, and it slightly depends on what you want to practice. But if you're at an intermediate level and beyond, you probably want something a bit more substantial, and that requires probably knowing the people you're speaking to, so you can sit down and have a proper discussion, or something that's a little bit more organized, whether it's a course or a language exchange, because having those very small, slightly superficial exchanges are fine, but they're not going to exercise the bit of your brain that does the wider vocabulary that you have and those more complex things. So you do have to slightly engineer situations to practice the kind of Arabic that you really need to be practicing.
I was going to say quickly as well, there are a lot of people that use Meetup, and there are regular like language meetups where you like might meet in a bar or a cafe, and we've just through conversational evidence from people, they've said that they're really positive and completely free as well to do, and they're probably all over the UK as well as in London.
Yeah, thank you. Meetups are really good, and there's lots of Arabic ones on there, I think. So if you like it to be a bit more social in a group, then that's a great way to do it.
Great. Our next question is from John, or not really a question, I guess more of a comment, saying, I had classes in school, but with the wrong method, and it was mostly grammar based, and it was so complicated that I always think about grammar now instead of trying to understand the meaning of a sentence. So Arabic seems so tiring for me.
Yeah, I think there can be a bit of a trap almost with Arabic grammar, in that there's a lot of it, and some courses are quite grammar based, and you certainly need all the core grammar with Arabic. The advanced material, if you can get your head around it, fantastic. And if you want to read poetry and write and understand literature, then you will need it. But for most people, that's probably not why they're learning Arabic, and they may be more interested in being able to speak and listen and have conversation and read, let's say, newspapers and news. And so you'll need a bit of the more advanced, so you're not thrown by it, but you probably won't get, it's not the best use of your time to do lots and lots and lots of grammar, because that time could be spent practicing speaking and practicing listening. So I think it sort of comes back to this idea of being clear about what you want to get from your Arabic, and whether the way you're spending your time studying and practicing matches up with that. And it sounds a little bit like you were on studying in a way that had maybe a bit too much grammar and wasn't quite what you then allowed you to go and use the language in the way that you wanted to.
Yeah. The next question is from Sarah, who says, thanks, Jacob, fascinating presentation. I wish I had listened to this a few years ago. How do you balance trying to learn or improve or keep up with your Arabic when you're in a full-time job?
It's a good question, because clearly it is a time-consuming thing, learning Arabic. I think ultimately you can only do what you have time for. But if you can find ways to slot bits of Arabic into your daily life, it does require you to be quite motivated, clearly. But if you, on the way to work, coming home, once we're traveling again, in your lunch hour, if you're willing to put in bits of Arabic, so on the tube you're listening to a podcast, or whatever works for you when you're driving somewhere, trying to fit in as much as you can. If you have a full-time job, the reality is you aren't going to be able to progress as fast as someone who is, say, fortunate enough to take a period studying full-time. But it's sort of working out what is realistic for you, I think, and then choosing a goal that you can achieve, rather than aiming really high when you are already completely busy and don't have time to do that at this point in your life, which is probably going to end up being more frustrating ultimately.
Okay, great. So we have a question. We have a lot of questions, actually, so we probably have to go through them quite quickly. But just, do you have any recommendations as to how to roll the R in Arabic? This is a question from Matthew, who apparently is having issues rolling his R's.
I'm not sure I do. I actually learned Spanish a long time ago, which rolls its R's. So although I had lots of challenges figuring out pronunciation, that was one that I didn't have too much trouble with Arabic. I think talking with a native speaker is the way that you get your pronunciation corrected. And when you are absolutely sure you're pronouncing it right, you'll find you're not, and eventually you'll get there. But I think talking to a native speaker is the answer on getting your pronunciation right in general.
Yeah. Well, the next question actually is from Susan, and she's asking, do you have any suggestions for attempting to converse with natives when you're a beginner? They just bombard me with words and I become discouraged. Do you have any suggestions for a beginner?
Yeah, I think it's difficult at the beginning period, because obviously when your vocabulary is still very small, there's a limit. You can't quite go out and have a conversation with someone in a normal context, because it will quickly go beyond what you can say and understand. I think you will do more practice in your class or on your own or with classmates at the beginning, as you build that basic vocabulary and practice listening to very simple materials. So courses will come with audio material that matches the vocab you're learning, that is recorded very slowly and clearly. And I think just making the most of that, which is a sort of pre-conversation level, and allowing your brain and your ear to improve, and steadily build up the vocabulary until you get into that level where you can then start to have more natural conversations and feel a bit less like you're being bombarded with words. But I think that the language exchanges or the language partners are good, because the person you're talking to, they need to adjust their level, as you will if you're speaking to someone trying to improve their English. And so that will be an artificially slightly simpler conversation, which is exactly what you need when you're in that beginner phase. So I think that's also a good way, where perhaps when you get slightly beyond the very beginner and you're getting a little bit more into conversational, that's very useful.
Yeah, I tend to, if I don't understand something, I just openly say, I don't understand. Can you repeat the question? I mean, a lot of times they'll be more flattered than anything that you're trying to, even though I'm half Arab, I'm never Arab enough for the Arabs. So I'm always considered sort of a foreigner, but they're always happy to, explain things to you no matter what. So I think it's also trying to get over the initial fear and feeling sort of intimidated. You just have to get over that and get used to the idea that you are bound to make mistakes, when you're learning a language anyway, but just, you're learning and you're trying and you're doing the best you can do.
Absolutely. And I think that Arabs recognize that their language, or certainly the standard Arabic, is really difficult, and native speakers have to study standard Arabic as well. It doesn't just come naturally, because it is complicated. Yeah. And so as a foreigner, I find you tend to get a lot of credit even for speaking really bad Arabic, which is quite nice for motivation, and people appreciate that you are speaking it and learning it, even if your level is still quite still relatively low.
Yeah, absolutely. Kim is asking if you have what's your opinion on Duolingo, the language app? Is it exclusively Arabic, or is it a language app? I think it's a language app, isn't it?
Yeah, Duolingo does lots of languages. I've used it a little bit. I think that it may do different kinds of Arabic. If I'm correct, Duolingo, I think, comes with words preloaded and images, and then sort of teaches you, rather than you creating your own flashcards. And with those programs, it's just important to make sure you're learning the right kind of Arabic. Typically, if something is described as just Arabic, that will mean standard Arabic. So if you're looking to learn a dialect, Egyptian Arabic or Levantine Arabic, then you'll need to make sure that Duolingo, or whatever the program is giving you words for the right kind of Arabic. But I think if it works for you, that, as I remember, it is a fairly visual kind of images, which for some people, visual learners, works really well. So I think trying out these different methods and using what feels like it's really helping you to learn it is probably the way to go.
Great. Next question is from GK, asking, can you recommend a school to learn Arabic in Amman?
Yes, so there are a number. From memory, I studied at a school called Malik, M-A-L-I-C, which was good. I've listed quite a few schools in my book. I'm going to see if I can flick through very quickly. Do you want to read the next question, and I will look at the answer to that one while you're...
Sure. Let's see, there's so many questions coming in. I want to be able to, sorry, this is a question from Eleanor. I want to be able to speak with friends in Algeria, which I understand is a very distinct dialect, but I'm also interested in reading and in learning more standard Arabic, as I am a linguist with knowledge of French, Spanish, and Japanese. Is it crazy to think I could try and learn a bit of both? How do I go about this, if so? Wow, amazing language.
I mean, you certainly can learn both. There are different schools of thought out there on what the best approach is. Should you learn a dialect first or standard Arabic? My personal view is I think I would caution against trying to do both at the same time. because I think particularly when you're beginning, that can just be very confusing, because the structures are different for each, and they all sort of blend together, I think, in your head as you're studying. Ideally, I would say if you learn standard Arabic first, once you've got on top of the core structures and rules, then learning a dialect after that will be a bit easier, because you can kind of see that basically the dialect is a sort of simplified version of standard Arabic. So for me, that would be the ideal order to do it. Different people have different experiences, though.
Yeah.
The last question, Jordan, so a few suggestions. Shall I type these in the chat? So there's a school called Qasid, which is strong on standard Arabic. There is a school called Malik. There's the Institut Français, which is good for colloquial Arabic, and Balitz. There are Balitz and Institut Français in lots of cities. Both tend to specialize in colloquial Arabic for the country that they're in.
Great. And I guess this is, I mean, there are a few more comments in the chat room, not so much questions. So I think I'm going to leave it there, but everyone is welcome to read the comments. They're very helpful nonetheless. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Jacob. We're running out of time. It's almost 2 o'clock, but before everybody goes, my colleague Becky had a couple of comments that she wanted to make before the end of the call. Becky, did you want to, we actually teach Arabic at the Arab British Center. So for those of you who are based in London, or actually at the moment, that's not relevant at all. If you're based at home with an internet connection and a computer, you can join our Arabic classes, which Becky has more information on.
Yeah, so our classes have been running for a number of years, and they're really popular. They're specifically Levantine spoken Arabic. So as Jacob said, it's a specifically Syrian dialect that we teach, but that kind of like spreads out across Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan. The classes are run by our teacher, Ibrahim Othman, who is originally from Syria. He's a fantastic tutor. And yeah, so we run 4 different modules at the moment. So you can either start as a complete beginner and start at module 1 and work your way up, or if you already have some kind of understanding of Arabic, maybe your family speaks Arabic but you don't yourself, like things like that, you can start at different modules, and there are different tests that we can offer to help you find your place. But we also just really recommend on our website, which I linked in the chat, each module has a really thorough synopsis of what takes place within the sessions. So each module is 5 weeks. It's 2 hours a week. As Amani said, at the moment they're online, which has been really successful. Usually they're in person at the Arab British Center. But yeah, so they're online. So regardless of where you are in the UK or in the world, I highly recommend joining them. And yeah, so 2 hours a week, you get a little bit of homework in between classes to help encourage you to do a little bit every day. As Jacob was saying, that's really, really important. The online classes cost £140 and that's for 10 hours of teaching with Ibrahim in a small group. We have the next term of courses are already available on our website. They start the week commencing the 8th of June. So if you're interested, please visit our website and you can book on right now, basically. If anyone has any specific questions, I'm here now to answer them. And yeah, but if not, maybe see you in some of the classes. That'd be really good.
Becky is she was a completely new learner, a beginner level Arabic, and she took the first 3 levels of Arabic. And I would say she enjoyed them very much, and she has
they're really
understanding of the language.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it was very fun and just good classes with good people, and Ibrahim is great, really friendly, and yeah, a great teacher basically. So I personally recommend the classes, not just because I work at the Arab British Centre.
So do check out our website. All the classes are listed in the courses section. It's fairly easy to navigate through.
Yeah, sorry. Kim, someone called Kim just asked a question. Are they live classes or are they pre-recorded? They're live, and they're also recorded so that you can refer back to them afterwards as well. And Ibrahim is amazing. He does lots of like recordings and shares. Sorry, Jane. If you Thanks. Yeah, so there's lots of different kind of audio content that you'll get shared as well, as different worksheets and vocabulary and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Becky, for that. And thank you very much, Jacob. That was a really, really insightful hour on understanding the intricacies of learning Arabic. Your book is out. It was published a few weeks ago now. When was it published?
That's right. It was published last month. So
last month.
It is out as a copy. So I hope people found that useful. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, there's a lot more detail on the areas I covered in the book, as well as a few other topics.
Yeah, so please do get yourself a copy of the book. It's available from, remind me, Waterstones?
Yeah, in the UK, it's available from Waterstones, Bloomsbury, Amazon. And Bloomsbury is the sort of the global one to go to if you're for most other countries.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions about the Arabic classes that we offer, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can email Becky. Her email is becky@arabbritishcenter.org.uk. All the information is, all the links and the information were posted in the side chat as well. So there is a way for you to save the chat if you wanted to refer back to those links. This session is also recorded and it will be on our website if you ever wanted to go back to it and just refresh your memory about some of the things that were said. It will be on our website within the next 24 hours. That's it, I think. I don't think I've forgotten anything. So thanks again. Thank you, Jacob. And thanks, everyone. Have a lovely week.